The crash was so loud it made the entire street fall silent, metal folding, glass exploding, a man shouting in shock, and when the smoke cleared, she realized she had just destroyed the one thing keeping him alive, but she still didn't know he had already saved her brother's life. If stories that hit the heart matter to you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because some truths deserve to be heard. Red Heart. Maya had been driving for nearly an hour with tears blurring her vision and anger burning through her chest like fire. Hospitals smelled like fear and endings, and she had just left one with news no sister should hear. Her younger brother Armin was still unconscious after the accident. Doctors kept using words like critical and were trying, words that sounded like apologies disguised as hope. She had begged, pleaded, prayed, nothing changed. And when grief has nowhere to go, it turns into rage. Her phone buzzed again with messages from relatives asking for updates she didn't have. She threw it onto the passenger seat, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. At the next intersection, traffic stalled. Horns blared. A small crowd had formed around a brightly colored food truck parked awkwardly across the lane. "Move," she shouted inside her car, slamming her palm against the horn. But the truck didn't move. Something inside her snapped. She jerked the wheel, trying to squeeze past, but her foot hit the accelerator harder than she intended. The car lurched forward, straight into the side of the truck. Crash. The impact sent metal buckling inward. Containers clattered. A window shattered into glittering fragments. People screamed and jumped back. Steam hissed from a ruptured pipe like an angry animal. For a moment, there was only ringing silence. Then the truck door burst open, and a man jumped down. He was tall, lean, wearing a faded apron streaked with sauce and oil. Shock spread across his face as he stared at the destruction, his livelihood crumpled like paper. "What did you do?" he shouted, voice breaking. Maya stumbled out of her car, shaking, eyes red. "You were blocking the road." I didn't." "That's everything I have," he said, running a hand through his dark hair, pacing as if trying to wake from a nightmare. "Do you even understand?" "I don't care," she snapped, tears spilling over. "My brother is dying." The crowd fell quiet again. Pain recognizes pain, but anger refuses to yield. The man froze. Something in his expression shifted, not softer, not kinder, just stunned. "I had to stop here," he said quietly. "Someone needed help." Maya laughed bitterly. "Great. Now 2 lives are ruined." Sirens approached in the distance, ambulance, police, the usual aftermath of disaster. But she barely heard them. All she could see was Armin's pale face in the hospital bed, machines breathing for him. The man looked at her for a long moment, as if trying to place something he couldn't quite reach. Then he shook his head, crouching beside the truck, touching the dented metal like it was a wounded animal. "Just go," he muttered. But she couldn't move. Because suddenly, guilt crept in through the cracks of her anger. The truck wasn't fancy. It was old, paint-chipped, menu written by hand. Someone had cared for it, built it piece by piece. And now it was broken because she lost control. An ambulance screeched to a halt nearby, not for the crash, but for someone else. Paramedics rushed past them toward a stretcher already waiting at the curb. Maya glanced over, confused. "What happened?" The man didn't look up. "Heart attack," he said. "Collapsed while ordering food. I called it in." "You called the ambulance?" "I also did CPR for 8 minutes." His voice was flat, exhausted. "That's why the truck was blocking the road." Her stomach twisted. 8 minutes. That was the difference between life and death. She looked at the dented metal again, imagining him kneeling on the pavement, fighting to keep a stranger alive while she was screaming in traffic. "I didn't know," she whispered. "People rarely do," he said. Police began asking questions, taking statements. Tow trucks arrived. The crowd slowly dispersed. Maya stood there numb as reality settled over her like cold rain. Finally, she forced herself to speak. I'll pay for the damage. He gave a hollow laugh. With what? Time? Customers I'll never get back? This truck was my second chance. Something in his tone made her look closer. There was exhaustion there, but also grief, old grief, the kind that never really leaves. I'm sorry, she said, and for once the words felt painfully small. He didn't respond. Later that night, after hours at the hospital with no change in Armin's condition, Maya sat alone in the waiting room scrolling mindlessly through local news on her phone. One headline caught her eye. Street vendor saves accident victim with CPR before ambulance arrival. Her heart skipped. She tapped the article. A blurry photo showed a familiar food truck, intact, taken earlier that day. And beside it stood the same man, apron, tired eyes, guarded expression. The article described how he had pulled a young man from a wrecked motorcycle, performed CPR, and stayed until paramedics arrived. Maya stopped breathing. She read the victim's name. Armin. Her brother. Her hands began to shake so violently she nearly dropped the phone. No. It couldn't be. But the details matched: the time, the location, the accident. The article even mentioned that the victim had no identification at first, that the rescuer had refused to leave until the ambulance arrived. The rescuer. The man whose truck she had destroyed. The man who had kept her brother alive long enough to reach the hospital. A sob tore out of her before she could stop it. People in the waiting room looked over, but she didn't care. Guilt crashed into her chest so hard it felt like she couldn't breathe. He hadn't just lost a truck because of her. He lost it after saving the most important person in her life. The next morning, she found him sitting on the curb beside the wrecked vehicle, tools scattered around him. In daylight, the damage looked even worse. The side panel was crushed inward, wheels misaligned, window gone. It didn't look reparable. He glanced up as she approached, wary. Insurance already came, he said. You don't need to. You saved my brother. The words hung in the air. He blinked. What? The motorcycle accident yesterday, she said, voice trembling. The young man. That was Armin. He's my brother. Color drained from his face. He made it to the hospital? He's still unconscious, she said, tears falling freely now. But he's alive because of you. For the first time, his composure cracked. He covered his mouth, eyes shining. I didn't know if I did it right. You did, she whispered. You gave him a chance. Silence stretched between them, heavy but no longer hostile. I'm so sorry, she said again. For everything. I destroyed the one thing you had after you saved the one thing I have. He looked at the truck, then back at her. His pulse came back just before the ambulance arrived, he said quietly. I kept thinking about my little sister. She died waiting for help years ago. I promised myself if I ever had the chance, I wouldn't let someone else lose their family like that. Maya felt her heart shatter and heal at the same time. Then let me keep that promise alive, she said. Let me fix this. Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. Maya didn't just write a check, she showed up. She organized a fundraiser, shared his story online, convinced local businesses to donate supplies. Volunteers arrived. Mechanics offered free labor. Artists repainted the truck brighter than before, covering the scars with color instead of hiding them. The man, whose name she learned was Samir, watched it all unfold like someone waking from a long winter. You don't have to do this, he told her one evening. I know, she said. I want to. And your brother? A small smile broke through her exhaustion. He opened his eyes yesterday. Samir closed his eyes, relief flooding his face. The day the rebuilt truck rolled back onto the street, a crowd gathered again, but this time there were cheers instead of gasps. Samir handed Maya the first meal served from the new window. On the house, he said. She shook her head. No. I owe you more than I can ever repay. He smiled gently. You already did. You gave this truck a third chance. Across the street, Armin stood with a cane, still weak but alive, waving awkwardly. Samir's eyes widened, then softened as he waved back. Maya looked between them and felt something warm settle in her chest where anger once lived. Sometimes life doesn't give you justice. Sometimes it gives you connection. Funny, she said quietly. I thought that crash destroyed everything. Samir followed her gaze to the bright, bustling truck, the people laughing, the young man alive because someone refused to give up. Sometimes, he said, things break so better things can be built. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness can survive even the worst moments, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because the world needs more stories where anger turns into hope. Yellow Heart. The crash was so loud it silenced the entire street, metal crushing, glass exploding, a man shouting in disbelief, and when the smoke cleared, she realized she had just destroyed the one thing keeping him alive, not knowing he had already saved her brother's life hours earlier. If stories that touch your heart matter to you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because some truths deserve to be heard. Red Heart. Maya had been driving without direction, her eyes swollen from crying, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. The hospital air still clung to her clothes, that cold, sterile smell of fear and uncertainty. Her younger brother Armin lay unconscious in the ICU after a devastating accident. Doctors had spoken in cautious tones, avoiding promises, using words like critical and we're doing everything we can. But to Maya, those words sounded like a slow goodbye. Her phone kept vibrating with calls from relatives asking for updates she didn't have. Finally, she hurled it onto the passenger seat and pressed harder on the gas, as if speed could outrun helplessness. Up ahead, traffic suddenly stalled. Cars honked impatiently. In the middle of the road stood a bright yellow food truck, parked at an awkward angle, surrounded by a few bystanders. Move! Maya shouted, slamming her palm on the horn. Just move! But the truck didn't budge. Something inside her snapped. She swerved, trying to squeeze past, but her foot hit the accelerator too hard. The car lunged forward, straight into the side of the truck. Crash! The impact sent shockwaves through the vehicle. Metal crumpled like paper. The serving window shattered, raining glass onto the pavement. Containers of food spilled everywhere. People screamed and jumped back. For a few seconds, everything went silent except for the ticking of the damaged engine. Then the truck door flew open, and a man jumped down. He looked to be in his early 30s, wearing a worn apron stained with oil and sauce. His face drained of color as he stared at the destruction. What did you do? He shouted, voice breaking. Maya stumbled out of her car, shaking, fury still boiling over. You were blocking the road. That's my truck, he cried, running a hand through his hair, pacing in disbelief. That's everything I own. I don't care, she yelled, tears spilling down her face. My brother is dying. The crowd fell quiet. Pain hung between them like thick smoke. The man froze. Something in his expression shifted from anger to stunned confusion. I had to stop, he said quietly. Someone needed help. Maya laughed bitterly. Well, congratulations. Now you need help too. Sirens wailed in the distance, not for the crash, but for something else nearby. Paramedics rushed past them toward a stretcher at the curb. Maya frowned. What happened? Heart attack, the man said flatly. Collapsed while ordering food. I called it in, did CPR until they arrived. Her anger faltered. You saved him? I tried. He looked back at the crushed truck, eyes hollow. That's why I was parked there. Guilt crept into her chest, heavy and suffocating. I didn't know, she whispered. People rarely do, he replied. Police arrived, statements were taken, tow trucks called. The crowd dispersed, leaving behind twisted metal and silence. Maya stood there numb, staring at the damage she had caused, not just to a vehicle, but to a life. That night, unable to sleep, she sat in the hospital waiting room scrolling through local news on her phone. One headline made her heart stop. Street vendor saves crash victim with CPR. Her fingers trembled as she opened the article. There was a photo of the same food truck undamaged, taken earlier that day. And beside it stood the same man, tired but determined. The article described how he had pulled a young motorcyclist from a wreck, performed CPR, and refused to leave until the ambulance arrived. Maya's breath caught as she read the victim's name. Armin. Her brother. The phone slipped in her hands. A sob tore from her chest before she could stop it. The man whose livelihood she destroyed had just saved the most important person in her life. The next morning, she found him sitting on the curb beside the wrecked truck, tools scattered around him as he tried to assess the damage. "You don't have to come back," he said without looking up. "You saved my brother," Maya said softly. He looked up, confused. "What?" "The motorcycle accident yesterday," she said, voice shaking. "That was Armin. He's my brother." The color drained from his face. He survived?" "He's still unconscious," she said, tears filling her eyes. "But he's alive because of you." For the first time, his composure broke. He covered his mouth, eyes glistening. "I didn't know if I did it right. I just kept going." "You gave him a chance," she whispered. Silence settled between them, no longer hostile, just heavy with emotion. "My sister died years ago," he said quietly. "No one helped her in time. I promised myself if I ever saw someone in trouble, I wouldn't walk away." Maya felt her heartache with a new kind of pain, one filled with understanding instead of anger. "Then let me help you now," she said. "Please." Over the next few weeks, Maya didn't just offer money, she offered time, effort, and determination. She started a fundraiser, shared his story online, contacted local businesses. People responded. Mechanics volunteered to repair the engine. Artists repainted the truck in vibrant colors. Strangers donated supplies and equipment. The man, whose name was Samir, watched in disbelief as his shattered livelihood slowly came back to life. "You don't owe me this," he told her one evening. "I know," she replied. "I want to do it." "And your brother?" A soft smile touched her lips. He opened his eyes today. Samir closed his eyes, relief washing over his face like sunlight after a storm. The day the rebuilt truck returned to the street, a small crowd gathered, not out of curiosity, but celebration. Samir handed Maya the first meal served from the window. "On the house," he said gently. She shook her head. "No. I could never repay you." Across the street, Armin stood with a cane, weak but smiling, waving at the man who had saved his life. Samir waved back, his eyes shining. Maya looked at them both and felt something warm settle in her chest where rage had once lived. "I thought that crash destroyed everything," she said quietly. Samir followed her gaze to the lively scene, the truck, the people, the young man alive because someone refused to give up. "Sometimes," he said softly, "things break so better things can be built." If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because the world needs more stories where anger turns into kindness. Yellow Heart.